Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We are going to get started with the Future of Open States roadmap talk right now. But first, as folks are kind of getting back to their computers and plugging back in, I want to remind everybody, especially if you missed our introduction session, this is the Open States Summit 2023. I am Jesse Mortenson, CTO of Civic Eagle. We are the Open States company, having adopted the project a couple years ago. We are here today in person at the University of Chicago. The Harris School of Public Policy and the Data Science Institute have graciously hosted us here. So we'll be having talks today. They're all virtual, streaming out of Chicago, and also hackathon sessions tomorrow and Saturday, hosted here at the Keller Center, where the Harris School of Public Policy is located. So once again, thank you to our generous sponsors. Really has been super helpful. And we are going to get into the Open States Summit 2023 roadmap and future talk in just a minute here. All right. So, a roadmap, thoughts on where we're going. To give you a quick overview, I'm going to kind of take this from, going back through our experience adopting the project as Civic Eagle, going from smaller things to bigger things, our vision for the future, changes you can expect, as well as some specific goals, both stuff that's happening right now and stuff that we want to be working on real soon. I expect that we'll have time for questions at the end. So if you have questions, please hold on to them and keep them till the end, and then get on in the chat and we'll call on you then. Awesome. So again, important backdrop. We adopted the project as Civic Eagle. Our background is that we started as a startup wanting to move the needle for people who are doing important policy advocacy work. And we relied on open states data. We found open states and we pulled that data and we built tools on it. And we gained a lot of respect for the project, of what it meant for us, what it means for other people through that process. We decided that we wanted to sustain the project in small ways, and eventually it became a bigger thing. We had the opportunity to get to know James Turk a little bit, founder, who's now our founder emeritus. He's in the room. I'm waving to him right now. We had the opportunity there was a need for more serious sustaining help. So we hired James on and kind of adopted the project as an organization from there. So that meant that we kind of held the status quo for a little while. We did a version of this summit last year that was just this kind of talks day, a little bit smaller. But that year we also began the process of restoring categories of data. So the project by necessity kind of had to shrink a little bit of the ambition for a while. And our first thing was just to try to do the small thing of starting to restore some of what had already been there, what had already been done in recent history, add a little bit more value back into the project. James left in early 2022. Luckily for us, we've kind of demonstrated that we can keep this project going. Lucky for James, he gets to go and explore other new different topics in life after doing this project for a very long time. Also lucky for us, we raised a Series A, which has helped us to hire a full data engineering, data science teams. And we're growing bigger things right now is what we're doing. So last year we had about 30-ish RSVPs. This year we had about 140 RSVPs. So what we're doing is trying to go from smaller things to bigger things, one step at a time, not getting ahead of our skis, but trying to build something that will be both sustainable and have a big impact. So what's our vision as Civic Eagle and for open states? We envision a future where data and people drive the future of public policy. And we're trying to build products as the new interface where that happens. Think about how public policy works today. And it's pretty easy to think of examples and dynamics that illustrate how today, people and data do not drive public policy in so many instances. Whether it's the very mundane of having to know all of these kind of like ancient rules about how legislators work, the legislative process and procedure, and how the rules and context and process is different from state to state, to bigger things, right? About who's got power, who might be trying to move policy in a way where it actually serves their purpose for you not to know about it, for some people not to be involved in the process. And so we're trying to drive towards a future where data and people are driving public policy. Not campaign contributions, not dark money, not narratives that don't even bother with addressing the merest shadow of real data and evidence. We're trying to imagine a world where the maze of rules and barriers is a little bit easier to look through, look over, and it's a little bit easier to imagine that a small citizens group has the same visibility as a well-funded organization that's doing lobbying. That's the kind of vision that we're moving towards. So that's the question I want to start us with: is what would it look like if people and data drove public policy? Well, I asked an AI to maybe imagine that question, and it came back with this image. So that's our first attempt. AI generation is really fun and hot right now, so I had to do one of those. I want to say another thing that's really important here, which is that without open states, there is no truly open data about state legislatures. It gets back to what I said in the intro section about why this is so important. There really isn't somebody else coming to save the day. It has been the work in the trenches over a decade plus of people writing scrapers, fixing scrapers, writing infrastructure around them to make it happen, that we have a truly open and standardized data set about what policy is being passed around the country that impacts people's lives in huge ways. So that's really important to us. That's something that's really special, and we are going to continue that. In contrast, like most of our competitors care about moving bills. They don't care about open data. And let's just be honest about that. With the exception of GovHawk, shout out to Tim, who we've recognized in an earlier talk. Most of our competitors, who they serve, are people who have resources and are spending money to move data. To move bills. They're trying to pass policy, and so they care about moving bills, not open data. And what I'm going to try to do is draw a contrast with our vision and how we operate and how we want to move the Open States project forward. And there's a commonality there, right? Like Civic Eagle is a for-profit company. We do help people move bills. That is very important to us. But our vision is bigger than that, right? Our vision is a world where people and data move public policy. Bills, laws, and legislative procedure, these are essential pieces if you want to move policy today, right? Like we need tools, and folks need tools to be able to cross those boundaries and get things accomplished. And that's really important, but it's not the whole story. If we care about people and data moving public policy, that means we need all of the people, right? So not just the people with the resources who can afford to pay for professional lobbying services, who can afford to pay for professional lobbying tools. If our vision is people and data driving public policy, we care about public conversations about policy. And we care about building the foundation for those conversations to happen effectively and in as many places as possible. Under democracy, the direction of public policy is the product of public conversations. Now, some of that work happens at legislatures, but not all of it. Really importantly, that work happens in the news. It happens, people talking in the street. It happens in a vibrant tapestry of advocacy groups, citizens groups, people lobbying from the grassroots up, as well as people lobbying in the back rooms and moving the levers of power. And what this means is if we're going to drive towards our vision, we need everybody. That means we need the researchers, we need the community groups, we need the people who are just figuring out how to lobby, We need the think tanks. We need the memes on social media. Our vision includes the people who are very important customers, people who do pro advocacy work, who need pro tools, but it's not limited there. Where I think some of our competitors stop there. Our vision is bigger than that. We need all the people, and we're trying to build tools to help have public conversations about policy. All right, so what are some of the changes that you can expect driven or as we drive towards this vision? What we're looking to establish here is one effort to build tools for talking about policy in public. We want all of our efforts here through the open side, through our commercial side, to amount to one effort that leads us to building those tools that improve the ability for all the people, all these groups I mentioned, to impact and understand the space of democracy, to move policy forward in a way that more and more over time is driven by people and data. One of those big changes is going to be rebranding. So if you know us, you might already be, or if you don't know us, you might already be thinking, Civic Eagle, what's Civic Eagle? What does it have to do with open states? If you're a customer of Civic Eagle, you know our product is called Enview. There's a few different names floating around, right? Our company was founded some years ago, and we have already pivoted before this point. So one of the changes we're going to introduce very soon, this month or next month, is to announce a new brand, and that rebranding is going to incorporate open states. We love the open states brand. It has really good goodwill. All y'all are here, most likely because you've heard of open states or worked with us in the past. And it's going to be a gentle process of change. I can assure you that open is still going to be part of how we talk about ourselves and how we interact with the world. But we're not going to have this confusing jumble of different names for different things. So that's one change you can expect, is a rebranding to be announced. And I want to reassure everybody that the commitment we made when we adopted open states hasn't changed, right? So these changes do not affect that core commitment, which is growing the open data core, which we see as the foundation of those public conversations about policy. So we sell tools to professionals. Those tools ingest this open data core. And so we see these not as opposition or sort of fighting against each other at all, but actually really well aligned. As we build the open data core and grow that with the data that really every resident of these jurisdictions here in the United States really should have a right to access and to work with, that enhances the product for free bill tracking. It enhances the product for our pro customers. And so that is really well aligned for us, and nothing has challenged our commitment to growing the open data core as we move forward. So that's one thing that even if you're going to see some changes soon, that's one thing that will not change. All right, so let's get into some of the goals here and some of the other changes that'll be coming down the pipe. For 2023, I want to present it's just three straightforward axes that we're thinking about. We want to grow open data. We want to deliver the most accessible bill tracking and legislative research tool on the planet. And we want to build tools for talking public policy in public. Now, the open data core, bill tracking, bill search, those are bricks in the foundation for tools about talking policy in public. But I think there's a bigger horizon we can look forward to. And I want to end when we get to that section, kind of imagining what it might be like to have those kind of tools, what it could do for us. So first track, growing open data. This is obviously our bread and butter, the nuts and bolts. This is what feeds where most people are intersecting with open states. We have, like I said earlier in the intro section, we have a lot of people depending on us. And so this is our most important priority, right? We get this done or we don't move on to these other priorities. There's a lot that's happening right now. We hired up those teams, as I mentioned, last summer. That has, we've gotten people comfortable and starting to get comfortable with the code base, and that's allowed us to start to accelerate the kind of impact that we're having. One of those impacts is that we have handled the new elected officials and redistricting. We had good news just yesterday that John on our team has kind of cracked the nut of some geographic data that we had to scramble and find. Turns out the U.S. Census has not yet published their usual data set that we've used in the past for redistricting. We don't know when that'll be out, so we had to kind of scramble and find some other data, and really appreciate John's work on that. Other people have worked on that as well. We found some data from, I think it's called the Redistricting Hub. We can share that in chat later on if you're curious about that. That for most of the country now, we should have that data in place. There's a big lift over the last few weeks to get elected official people data updated. So that has been going. That's still ongoing, still need help and contributions around that. We have changes rolled out now for faster data ingestion. We know in some of our jurisdictions, the web scraper takes, as much as like 24 hours when there's a bunch of bills in the session to get through it. So we've implemented a change on the back end that should allow some of that data about new bills in those big and slow sessions to get in faster. So that's an improvement that I'm really happy with. We also have event and hearing data in the API. Tim has done a bunch of work in recent history on event scrapers about public hearings, and now we're pulling those in, have that data available in the API. Probably still a little bit of work there to get full coverage in good shape, but that's another big improvement. Another project we're undertaking right now is completing committee data for all jurisdictions. We want that to be automated like our other categories of data, pulling in data about who's on committees, what are the committees in different states, trying to tie bills to committees as much as possible. And last but not least, we're also making improvements to bill action classification. We're applying some research that Alex Garlick, who's one of our guest highlights later this afternoon, his group helped to make some better rules for recognizing what's happening with bills, and we're working those into the code base as well. And I'm really excited to announce what's happening soon for us in terms of growing open data. We are not stopping with the United States. So for the first time, we are going to take this project into other national jurisdictions. We are going to be building open policy data for countries in Africa. I can't announce all of the details today, but we'll let you know that we're pretty committed to this. So as an organization, we hired Obina as our VP of Africa. He's awesome. He's been working for months preparing the ground for a couple of the places where we're going to start. I'm also going to mention a data engineer on our team, Shogo. Shogo is awesome. We hired Shogo not specific to this project, but just because he's a really good data engineer. But he's also based, both of these folks are based in Nigeria, to give you a sense of like how committed we are to this direction. So if I think back to the kind of change that Open States made and the impact that it made, 13 years ago in the United States, like in a situation where you don't yet have organized public data, structured public data about legislation, that's the kind we want to find other jurisdictions, other countries where we can make that same kind of impact today, right? Like where that hasn't happened yet, and we want to take the model and experience and skill and apply that so people can benefit from open data all across the world. Our ambition is to really be working on public policy globally. Like that's our long-term vision. All right, so second track of those three that I mentioned. So this one is we want to deliver the most accessible bill tracking and legislative research tool. Right now, we deliver that in two different ways. So we have NView, which is our pro tool, created and owned by Civic Eagle. And we have openstates.org, which in addition to the data offerings, the scrapers, the API, all that, is also a pretty good bill search and tracking tool in its own right? Like anybody can sign up, create an account, or not create an account, read about bills, understand bills. If you create an account, you can subscribe to updates on bills. And so it's actually, it's a lot of data that you get access to, and we have a lot of people interact with it, right? Like there's clearly a need for a super accessible way to start working with and tracking legislation. And the way that's happening right now is kind of through these two separate offerings. They're two separate code bases, and they both pull in the same. They're both working on that same open data core, but different code bases. To give you a little more context on NView, this is our flagship product as Civic E. We've been working on this for years. You're seeing some logos from organizations that trust us, are our customers today. We're growing fast, and NView is a little bit of a newer code base, a little bit more of a modern approach in terms of the bill search and tracking functionality. And people are really happy with it, honestly. Like, not to get too far into bragging territory, but we get really good feedback from folks who use it in a professional setting, people who are trying to do a lot with very little resources in many cases, and try to move policy and give voice to communities who otherwise don't have a voice at their state legislature. And we get good feedback, which is super gratifying. So we feel really good about this application and what it's doing for people who want to do bill search and legislative research. So soon, our goal is to make one offering, right? So we have one legislative research bill tracking tool that is the best, the most accessible in the world. So you can see I've just kind of slapped logos on top of each other. I, again, can't announce the branding and what that's going to be called today, but soon you can expect us to start migrating towards having one offering based on what today is called NView. So based on that newer code base, better features, faster bug fixes. That's our goal. One bill tracking and legislative research tool with improved search and usability. So our commitment, we are not taking features away from people. If you're using openstates.org today, we are not going to take any of that functionality away. We're not going to gate that functionality behind a paywall. Still free for individual usage. And again, that goes back to our vision. Our vision is a future where people and data drive public policy. And we can't achieve that vision straight up if we don't have all of the people who need to be involved in that conversation. And that means radical accessibility to some of the core data, the core features that citizens need to track legislation. The advantages for you, if you're an openstates.org user today, is that you're going to get better search features. We've got stuff in NView that I think is going to be feel a lot better. We're going to have faster bug fixes, because this will allow us, our team, to focus on one product instead of having to kind of jump back and forth as problems emerge. So you should get overall better service, still free access in the ways that you expect with openstates.org today. Obviously, there's going to be a migration path. We're going to try and go step by step by that and listen for feedback. I'm not announcing any like sunset end of life date today, but expect some communication about that to start up, right? So I love to start that feedback process today and kind of get your ideas, hear your concerns, like to make sure that we're hearing from the community and we can incorporate your concerns and ideas into that migration plan. So again, I'm not announcing a done deal today. I'm announcing that intention to move in this direction, hear where you're coming from, and try to do it in as smooth and effective way as possible. We're not going to do any radical changes during the legislative session. We're not going to, if you're tracking bills today, we're not going to totally throw a wrench in your works in the next few months. But we are going to start moving down this path. And you might be asking, okay, well, what does that mean for the openness of the project? Which is a good question. What will remain open? We are, as I said, completely committed to the open data core, the related tools around that, web scrapers, the API code, the specification, everything that delivers that open data, we are committed to remaining open. The piece that we're going to change is the bill search and tracking UI. And again, the biggest issue is just that the way we're trying to support this project, maintaining two software applications that do the same thing just is not working for our team. It's just not effective. We're not getting the consistency of bug fixes and features to the people who are using openstates.org today that we really want to. Like, that hurts that that's been the case. I want to fix that, and I want to make sure that all of our work to making that the most accessible bill tracking legislative research tool benefits both pro customers and free users. All right, so once again, love to hear your thoughts, concerns, questions about that. We'll have some time at the end of the presentation here to start that, but we'll have time after that as well. When we get to this third track, so third goal is tools for having conversations about public policy in public. So what's happening right now? How are we doing that right now? We're having this summit. It's a bigger version than what we did last year. It's work, right? It's hard work for our team to get this together. Thank you again to the folks at the Harris School for alleviating a lot of that burden by being such gracious hosts. But this is, part of what we're doing. We're going to keep building on this, keep opening more doors to communicate with you and hear from you in the community. We're also doing one-on-one outreach to users. I'm starting to do sort of a mini census, especially of folks who are using our API and leveraging that to build their own tools, to get a more of a sense of like, okay, like what's your experience been? What are you doing with it? What's the impact been? And to reiterate, right, our open data core and accessible build tracking they're blocks in the foundation for public conversations about policy. They're not the endpoint, right? Like we see these as absolutely important foundations that we continue to build and grow, but not the end of our ambition. And what I want, kind of get into the end of the talk here, what I want you to think about is, what might it mean to have tools to have these kind of public policy conversations? How do policy conversations happen right now? Where do you see data come into play? Where do you see people actually have the opportunity to make their case and reference data? In the intro talk, I mentioned and gave reference to the issue of abortion rights. And when that Supreme Court decision came down, there was so much interest journalistically from advocacy groups, just a flurry of activity to track even just like what's happening. And I think about a situation like that, and it really makes me wonder, like, do we have all of the tools that the public needs to have those conversations really effectively? If somebody wants to say, hey, look, here are the 47 bills across these different jurisdictional boundaries that are impacting people in different ways, can they bring that data forward effectively? Can they annotate it and present it in a way that really brings that argument to life, that brings light to the subject, and not just argumentation, but light and data to the subject? That's a question that keeps us up at night. That's a question that animates us as we think about the long term. And I imagine situations like, your organization's working on a policy agenda. Maybe you're tracking a few bills. You might be trying to find out who else is tracking the same stuff. And obviously, if you're well connected, if you're at the center of networks, that might be easy. But for a lot of people, that's not easy. Is there a tool that we can build to help organizations who are doing similar work connect with each other? Imagine being able to invite both expert stakeholders and grassroots advocates, regular folks whose lives are impacted by policy, into the same process and tooling to do policy research, to make your case publicly based on that research. Do we have the tools today that enable that kind of sophisticated conversation, effective conversation that works and is really accessible, both for professionals, for seasoned advocates, and for people who are just starting to get familiar with how this world works? Obviously, there's always going to be policy work done privately, and that's okay. We embrace that. We make tools to make that happen. But getting back to our vision, we can't achieve that unless we're focusing on all of the conversations, both private and public, and making sure that we build tools that enable both private and public conversations. We want to get to tools that change how we think about talking about policy, researching policy, and engaging regular people with policy. So that's where we're trying to go. Today, we help you track bills and research legislation. Tomorrow, we're going to be building tools for talking policy in public. And with those goals in mind, I am going to go back to the chat and see if we've got any questions. I'm going to ask Max to help out and see who's in the stack here. stop my screen share. There we go.
No questions currently. Wide open for somebody there.
Okay, so looks like the chat is currently wide open. So if you've got any questions or reactions that you want to share as you look at this roadmap, any ideas that we haven't considered that you're thinking about that are really interesting to you, get something in the chat and I will call on you and we'll get you talking here. I got Spencer in the chat. Spencer, do you want to talk about this?
So we are currently working on building some of those functions you're talking about for tomorrow, but we need funding. So are you guys seeking any partners, or could you possibly help out some smaller organizations?
Yeah, great question. We definitely are looking for partners and conversations. Like we should definitely have the conversation about how we can help. I do not have access to a huge pile of money, unfortunately. Like I would love that, but unfortunately I don't. But there might be people in this network who do. So could you tell us just a little bit more about what you're trying to build? Like share a little bit of when you think about in your mind what those tomorrow functions look like. What are you thinking about?
All right, so right now we're in the process of pre-building a number of different tools that all come together to work together. So the idea being just like how Google collects massive data in order to sell you penis pills. We've been collecting massive data in order to help people make social change. So you talked specifically about talking public issues with people. So now over the last number of years, we've noticed that a lot of these hackathons, some great ideas are developed, but they're never brought to fruition, or rarely brought to fruition, because the hackathon goes on for 2 days and that's it, or it goes on for a month and that's it. So we're building a tool where you do an online hackathon where you sign up as whatever your specialty is, and you become like say about you're a doctor, you're an electrician, or whatever, so that if anyone has questions about that particular field, it would go to you, and the structure would be built in such a way where you would be forced to recognize that you need all of the stakeholders involved. Like a lot of times, policies are put into place without really considering the actual needs of the people who are being helped. Like, oh, we'll just give homeless people cell phones. Like, okay, well, do they have ways of charging them? Do they have there's a lot of different programs out there that are thought out from one point of view, as opposed to seeking who it is going to impact both positively and negatively. And that would be the goal of that particular tool. But there's a lot of other tools that maybe you could talk about.
Yeah, awesome. That's very cool. So it sounds like your tool is kind of an evolution of hackathons. Am I understanding that right?
Yes. So that particular tool is evolution of hackathons. Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. Have you, Spencer? Can I ask where are you located?
Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay, cool. Do you have any local like hack or civic tech groups that you're connected with? Or
there's some hackathons in Philadelphia we've gone to, and there's some locally. So Philadelphia's about an hour away, and then New York also 2 hours away.
Cool. Yeah, my first recommendation would be to reach out to the Shy Hack Night folks, because they've been running a hackathon, a sort of a civic hacking space, very successfully for, I don't remember how long. James isn't in the room anymore. I'd ask James, but a long time, years, right? They've got some sustainability and some idea of what works there. So it might be a good partner for thinking about some of that stuff.
Called Shy Hack?
Yeah, it's the Chicago Hack Night, so it's called Shy Hack, CHI.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. We have other questions in the chat. Chris and Jason. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Hey there all, can you see me?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess my general thing as the question goes there is, keeping this this data, and for us, the people data is what we care about. Do you have thoughts about how you might help facilitate increasing the rate that type of data could be added and updated, whether it's building tools for people or maybe even hiring someone whose job it is just to focus on that kind of data stuff, because sometimes that can kind of spread between technical and non-technical, and understanding when you're looking at the right data. There's a lot of like challenges. That's just from our perspective, some of the things that we see when we have a volunteer who maybe wants to help with that. There's a lot of things you have to teach them before they can be productive there. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Chris. And we've talked a little bit in the past, and Riley's done some work to kind of write up sort of a product doc for building some tools around, like, really this case is like people data is a case of there's data that we can kind of scrape, but there's a lot of changes that are hard to capture through scraping. And so it's kind of the space of how do we handle data that needs to be manually curated, right, or manually researched and entered. And it's definitely an area of interest that I want us to tackle this year. We didn't get to it last year, which was a bummer, and I'm hoping we can get to it this year. Some of our work in Africa, and specifically in Nigeria, will kind of overlap with that because there isn't a scrapable target, from a government website there. So we're trying to build out. There will be some synergy there to kind of build out, like, how do we manually do data entry and management. So yeah, I'm hoping we can get to it, but I think that's a really good idea. It feels inevitable that we can't solve everything with scraping. So what do we do about that? And how do we, and part of what I'm concerned with is what's on the other side of that, right? Is that us just like doing a bunch of outsourced data entry, which is what a lot of other, honestly, just a lot of other companies just pay people offshore, pretty relatively low wages to do a bunch of data entry. And not saying that to say, okay, that's inherently bad, but it does point to, like, okay, if we build a tool, are we going to have, is it geared towards that kind of effort, or is there a tool that we can build that will really work for volunteers who might come in and out of it, which might be a higher bar for what that tool looks like. So that's the piece I'm most curious about. Cool, great points though. I'm going to go to Max. Who should I go to next year, Max?
Yeah, Jason, with an idea that Civic Eagle could offer bounties or fellowships.
Awesome. Max, are you unmuted, or should I repeat you?
I am muted.
Okay, I will repeat you then. Yeah, so Jason offered the idea of offering bounties or fellowships. Jason, do you have a mind of, like, what the price tag is? What might be that would move the needle for people? Like, how big are we talking here? Not sure if we still have Jason. Okay, Jason says he is not sure yet. We'll write that down. We'll think about that more. I'm going to go to Ed. Ed asks, will there continue to be open API access points? Yes. Great question, Ed. Yes. So I should have been more clear on that slide when I said code and specs will be open. That does include the operating API. We're not planning to change the API access. We have a lot of people who depend on that OpenStates API, doing really important stuff. And honestly, just from a Civic Eagle perspective, having that API open allows us to have conversations with people who are doing that interesting stuff. Sometimes that leads to them becoming customers. Again, there's a good mutual benefit there, both for the public impact side of the project and sustaining us financially. So yes, the API will continue to be open. I will put out a early unofficial warning, we're looking at the V2, the GraphQL API as maybe something to sunset, or at least announce a sunset sometime this year. Just because that's been up for a while. API v3 is faster, it's easier for us to reason about. So that's one super early warning, that if you're going to build something today, I'd recommend building on the v3 version. But yes, that's my answer there. Let's keep it moving. Nasya asks, when do you anticipate closing the bill search and tracking UI on open states, and will the migration be right after? We will open up migration before we close off anything on openstates.org. So we'll give people a chance to come over to the new tool, give us feedback before we do any kind of hard cutoff. So it won't be like one day you just show up and nothing's there. We're going to go step by step with that. Let's see. Next question. Have we ever done cohorts for nonprofits? Desiree, thanks for asking that question. Could you share a little bit of context there? I'd like to hear more about what you mean by cohorts for nonprofits.
What I mean by cohorts for nonprofits, since you do a lot of work with the legislators and gathering like information on bills. If you have, I'm pretty sure this would be a very resourceful tool. Maybe a cohort, like, because it's a longer period, like, because it's a lot of information to take in when you're a beginner. So that's just wanted to see, because you said like you guys rely on the data and all that stuff. So that's what I'm saying. I've ever done like a cohort for like the nonprofit, so they can learn how to do this type of stuff also.
Yeah, so kind of a learning, kind of onboarding thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool idea, you know, and I don't know, I like that idea. I don't know if we'll be able to run it or if we, but because I think there are some organizations that do some of this. I just had a conversation that was super cool with fellow from an organization called City Bureau. They have a project called the Documenters Project. And they actually got a huge grant of money recently to train people to document public meetings, like government meetings. So I'd really recommend checking out, in the short term, checking out the Documenters Project. In the medium term, I'm definitely interested in learning more about them, seeing what kind of partnership, maybe there's a way we can kind of pull structured data in from their folks' efforts to kind of like add to the value of that data.
I'm also in California, so.
Okay.
So are you guys out here also? Like, are you guys out here also, or?
Well, we are a remote company at Civic Eagle, so we are theoretically everywhere. We do have at least one literal staff person in Oakland, so we do have some on the ground presence in California. Documenters, I can't remember which cities they are at currently, but they're expanding. So if they're not in California yet, I bet they will be soon.
No, for sure. Thank you.
Awesome, great question. Let's see, Diego also expressed some interest in learning more about fellowship or volunteering. Awesome, thank you. Alex Johnson asks, should further dev be against OpenStates be postponed until the new service is released? I would say no, because again, that API v3 is not going to change. We're going to support that for a long time. API v2, we might end of life, like I said, announce an end of life sometime this year. So if you're building something today, I would recommend building it against the API v3, and that should be very stable. The overall data format, the kind of like specs of what the data looks like, we're not going to change. A lot of people support that today, and we want to keep supporting that. The piece that will change will affect people who are going to the website and using the web interface to look for bills, to track bills, and to subscribe to bill updates. That piece will change, but the kind of API access to data, the bulk data offerings won't change. We're committed to keeping those. So you really shouldn't have to worry about any API or bulk data integrations. Awesome. Jeff Pierce mentions that Documenters is hiring a CTO shortly. Thank you for that. That is a great piece of context. David asks, you've been using the people.geo API, which is great. How can you refresh and validate people data in bulk? Great question. So if you need to pull in all of our elected officials and bring that into whatever tool or project you're working on, I think there's an offering on the bulk data offerings page. So if you go to openstates.org/data, somebody could put that in chat, that'd be awesome. I believe there is a format for that data that you can get to right from that page. One of those links.
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can get all the legislator information, but what I'm having difficulty is I've got a database of addresses that I need to get the legislative districts for so that I can personalized emails to our members to tell them who their representative is.
I see.
And right now, that's very difficult to get refreshed within the quota that I've been given.
Gotcha. Yeah, great question, David. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, I misunderstood it the first time I read it. Yeah, so what you're talking about is you've got your members' addresses and you need to get those geocoded to the districts, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's
geocoding is not a problem. I've got the latitude and longitude. I just don't
Mhm.
have what the district numbers are for the U.S. as well as the upper chamber and lower chamber of the states.
Okay. Yeah, and Chris is chiming in. Anybody else have experience with that challenge of trying to do like bulk matching lat long to districts?
The Google Civic API is really good. I've used that, where you just feed it an address and it gives you everything.
It seems like Open States is actually better information than the Google Civic API for me. I use Google Civic as well, Google Civic Info, and I use Open States as a backup, but frequently I'm getting Open States information is better than the Google Civic Info. And I do also use that Geocodio as a third. but I find that Open States is the best right now for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's gratifying for us, right? Like we want to be the best.
That's why I'm sitting in on this today.
Yeah, amen. Thanks for being here. Yeah, that's really cool. What I want to try to do is get a sense of how much of a need for it. We should be able to figure out something for you in the short term, but I want to assess how many people might need a similar thing. So if you are on this call and you think you might need something like that, please reach out. And we'll try to figure out what the right solution is. Obviously, like huge burst access can be tough for us, right? Because if we get a bunch of requests all at once, the way the API is set up, that can be some of our, hairiest situations. But I want to take that down and follow up on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, David.
Jesse, looks like John might have a note on this.
Yeah. Is there a comment from John on this topic too?
I was raising my hand on Zoom. Yeah, so the Geo API is technically a slightly separate database from the regular bulk data for Open States, which is why it isn't in the bulk data downloads easily available, but that's something we can fix. So I'm going to add that to my backlog, and David, I might have something for you soon.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, John.
John, thank you so much. If I can help, please let me know.
I just have to actually do a PG dump of a separate database. So if I hope I know how to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. And thanks to other people who are writing in on chat about this topic too. I'm going to go to Ed, who's got a question. Does Enview have a different set of scrapers? Broadly, no. Like I said in the talk, we're relying on the what you see as the Open States scrapers. The data that comes into Open States, we pull that into Enview. So that same kind of open data core is relied on for both tools. There are pro features in Enview that are in Open States, right? Like we do have to support our business somehow and make money to keep being able to contribute back to Open States. So there are pieces with regard to collaboration, with regard to data analysis and advanced data insights that are pro features in Enview. But broadly, I mean, there's a class of scrapers we use just to double check that our data is correct. But today, no, like broadly speaking, obviously there's a few edge cases, but 98% of the data comes through the Open State scrapers.
Thanks.
Awesome. So Meg asks, will the data scrapes currently built out be migrated with the big search and tracking UI, where they need to be rebuilt? No, they will not need to be rebuilt. And that is a good segue with that last question I just answered, because we use that same data to feed into the Enview tool. So The scrapers, obviously, we are kind of migrating scrapers slowly to the spatula format to make them a little bit more modern, a little bit better fit to how we do things today. But yeah, there should not need to be some big downtime in migration with scrapers. That would be a huge undertaking. So we want to avoid that. All right. Next question. I am seeing some comments about redistricting. Agreed. That is a big pain. Thanks for sharing all that. Alex asks, can I comment on the extent of the new product this year? Continue to be open source. Is the goal just to combine the two products for resource efficiency, where the source also go private? So I want to talk about, we think about open states and like we're really referring to a bunch of different efforts when we think about open states. There's the effort to make the summit happen. There's the effort to collect and put people data and merge PRs into the people repository with people data that our friends at ResistBot help with a lot. And we got to kind of unbundle, right? We got to take all the things out of the open states bucket when we talk about what's going to be changing. So there are a bunch of code repositories under our GitHub organization. You can go there today, right now, and see what's in there. One of those is called openstates.org. And that's the code for the Python Django-based application that runs openstates.org. Now, there are some tools in there, like the V2 API that are parts of that application. Also, the find your representatives tool that's in that application, that we are not planning to change any of. They're not part of that same switchover. The piece that we will look to retire is the part of that openstates.org code that does bill search, tracking, and subscriptions. So that app, the general repository, may live on to continue to provide access to the other tools, to continue to provide access to managing your API key and usage, right? So that application currently has multiple uses and features that run through it. We're looking to migrate the piece of it that is searching for bills, looking at bills, tracking bills, subscribing to bills. That's going to move to our kind of unified offering, and that unified offering is going to be closed source. So that's the part. The short answer is parts of openstates.org code repository will be retired under that plan. And I think I might be at the bottom of the list of questions. Max, anything else you're saying?
That is you covered the full gamut of all the questions. 7 minutes left in our allocated time.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask one more time. Anybody with questions or reactions or thoughts you want to share about the roadmap, about the future open states at this point?
Where do you have a suggestion page?
I don't think we did have a suggestion page, but we do have, you can get in the matrix space. I think would be a great place to share suggestions right now. I should also mention that's one more change. That's kind of a minor change. We're experimenting with matrix. You already noticed, I'm sure. The whole Slack pricing change has been a motivator to be we don't really want to be in a place where we have to pay for, to have additional people come into the community. We want that to be really low friction. So we're thinking about moving the chat space to matrix. And I think that's probably the best place for suggestions overall. But worst case scenario, you can always fire us an email at contact@openstates.org. So that's our common denominator, so just send us an email. Very cool. All right, one last call. Any other questions or thoughts about the roadmap talk? All right, with that said, the stack is open. Or stack is wide open. It's nobody on there, and I'm going to close this down and announce our next talk. So our next talk is going to start at 2:00 Central. That's about 20 minutes from now. And that's going to be our user highlights. Should be very cool. We've got 3 really interesting projects, and people from those projects will be sharing and offering a chance for you to ask questions. I think it's going to be great. I look forward to it. So see you in about 20 minutes at 2 o'clock Central on this very same video.